joined by Danny Sanchez, the Human Geo guy himself, and we are covering AP Human Geography tonight. Everyone, I want to show you our Human Geography Study Guide pack. If you're panicking and you're like, what's in unit, whatever, chill. It's all in this study guide pack and it's completely free for you. So make sure that you've got that covered. And I want to make sure that I have a noise on YouTube. So this study guide pack actually covers each of the units with essential terms you need to know. So unit 1, thinking geographically, unit 2, population and migration patterns and processes. We've linked this in the description. It's available for you. Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you tonight. What are we going to be covering in our little bit less than an hour long broadcast tonight?
Everything. If it's coming up, I'm going over it in the next 27 seconds. Boom.
That's right, 20 seconds, that's it. And then we're going to wrap up around 8:50 or so, 8:55 Eastern time. And that's time for y'all to go to bed because all my little AP Human Geo people need to chill and stop trying to cram everything in at the last second. So Danny, I'll turn it over to you and encourage you guys as you have questions, post them in the chat. If you like this video, press that like button and be in touch with us at Marco Learning. We're here to help.
All right, thanks to everybody for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen with all of you. Very excited to be here sharing this. I'm just going to lay it all my cards out there on the table. This is my 28th hour of review that I'm getting on between all the reviews I did over the weekend, the kids I tutored in person, the kids I tutored online. For my own students, I did 3.5 hours yesterday, 3.5 hours today. This is hour 28 of Human Geo content for me since Saturday. So if my head starts rotating in the screen, that's just the fact that I've officially lost my mind. But again, so glad you're joining us. So glad that the exam is finally here. You are one sleep away from taking the AP Human Geo exam. And again, now me saying that made me realize, oh my God, maybe they're not going to sleep. Maybe they're that nervous. But again, you're here. It shows that you care. It shows that you have interest in actually being successful for the exam. All right. So this is our last minute. We're calling it the crunch session. What they call it the crunch session. Like, does that involve doing abs? It's been a minute. So no abs, thankfully. Not a workout routine for us here. All right. So I am Danny Sanchez, aka the Human Geo Guy, joining you from Port St. Lucie, Florida. For those of you who don't know where Port St. Lucie, Florida is, which should be most of you, it is about an hour and 45 minutes north of Miami and about an hour 45 minutes south of Orlando. By the way, telling you how far I am from two places, using those as landmarks, that is an example of a key term in Human Geo. Let's see if you can give that to me in the chat, what that term actually is. All right, so I'm going to proceed through and go through our agenda for today, welcoming you here for joining us. Marco Learning, again, so gracious to be hosting all of these AP sessions and all of these subjects with all of their, great teachers from around the country. Somehow I snuck onto that list. I don't know how. I've got them all fooled here. But the rest of our agenda is the theme of the night. We'll get into that theme in a second. The points of emphasis as far as content, and then some last minute multiple choice question reminders and free response question reminders, and then some final thoughts at the end. Guys, like, this is not something where like I'm going to have you guys jump in here, and if you did nothing all year long, you're going to hang out with me for 40 minutes and then take, get a 5 on the exam tomorrow. This is more than anything just an opportunity for you to get a little bit of confidence boost. And if this helps you answer 2 or 3 more questions right tomorrow or earn that extra couple of points, that might be enough to push you over the edge, because the margins between these scores can be pretty narrow. So again, if you can answer an extra 2 or 3 questions right, answer an extra FRQ a portion correctly, that is going to give you that much more of an opportunity to get that passing score that you've been working towards all year long. All right. And without further ado, let's go over the theme of the night. Story time, as in do not become a story. Mixed in throughout here, I'm going to be hitting you with some stories of things that have happened to former students of mine, people I know, teachers I'm familiar with. And you don't want to end up with Marco sitting around the couch with all the little Marco puppies saying, well, this is what happened to this kid on the AP exam of 2023. The theme is don't become a story. We do not want story time. All right. So yes, and a bunch of you answered correctly in the chat. Relative location. Can you give me another word for relative location, another vocab term for relative location? I'll be very impressed if you can give that to me. And again, don't become a story. I can't emphasize that enough. So many kids over the years have become stories of something not to do, something to avoid. So please make sure that by the end of tomorrow around lunchtime, you have not become a story that I will be using for 2024's Human Geo exam. All right, let's move on from here and begin to go over some of the points of emphasis. The very first thing I want to go over with you is development. And development is just code words for rich and poor. And some of the ways you can say rich world and poor world. What are other names for rich world? Tell me in the chat. What are other names for the rich world? What are other names for the poor world? If you can give that to me in the chat as well. So I'm asking for a few things in the chat. I'm trying to get you guys to be actively engaged with that. So make sure that you are following along there. All right, so the disparities that exist, and again, life is very different from the rich world to the poor world. And also, the idea is it can also be applied in essentially every unit in this course, from unit 1 all the way through unit 7. I didn't make a connection for each unit as I put these slides together, but I did for a few of them. And I want to begin by going through, first off, differences between farming in the poor world and farming in the rich world. And let me see in the chat, I'm just realizing because I only have the one screen, I'm like trying to go back and forth to see like what you guys are saying in the chat. So there's a little bit of a lag in me recognizing some of the things that you're saying. All right, but still, in the developing world, and I hope that's one of the phrases you used for the poor world, also the less developed countries or LDCs, the farming is in order to survive. And I'm hoping that some of you are able to give me that vocab term for what it means to survive. And that vocab term is subsistence farming. And subsistence farming is what you're looking at when the farmer is growing food that's going to be in there within the community by their family, and it's right there and immediate to you. You know, one of the things I like to emphasize to my students over all the years I've taught this course is that the most common person on earth is an Asian farmer who's a subsistence farmer and just trying to generate enough food to survive. And you see a picture like that on the left, although it's not Asia, right? Also, I want you to look carefully at that picture. If you can, in the chat, tell me, what type of farming is that on the left? The type of farming that you see where the fields are cleared and looks like there's like a char on the floor. Hopefully you're giving the right answer in the chat. Like I said, I can't actually see it right now, so I'm trying to get caught up with that. But ultimately, what you're looking at here is survival farming, subsistence farming. All right, on the right, this is commercial farming. What's the big giveaway that this is commercial farming on the right? Emphasis on the word big. All right, what is the difference between farming in the rich world and farming in the poor world? What is that difference? Hopefully you can tell me in the chat. All right. And the purpose of commercial farming, the name is right there. It's going to be all about the farming. It's about growing the food commercially for a profit. You're trying to sell it away from where it's grown, and you're trying to do that, you know, to generate revenue. That is the difference. So again, the big difference, farming in the poor world, you're just trying to survive. Farming in the rich world, you're trying to actually make a profit. By the way, if you I'm assuming some of you said it in the chat, the farming on the left is actually called slash and burn agriculture or shifting cultivation. Both of those names apply there. On the right, what you see there is grain farming with the big old wheat fields. And the indicator of the fact that it's commercial farming is the big, giant, multi-million-dollar thresher that is working its way through the wheat fields. All right, so that's differences farming in the poor world versus farming in the rich world. Now let's look at urban issues. And what you see here is the divide that exists in development. And a lot of times we compare poor countries to rich countries, but there's also disparities that exist within countries. And you can see it very obviously in front of you. This is Mumbai in India. And one of the things that you will see in this picture is, hey, here's all these tall apartment buildings, high quality housing, but closer to you in the foreground is something else. Who can tell me in the chat what this type of housing is called on the edge of a city that is barely holding itself together, doesn't have much infrastructure, and where the poorest people might live? What are these areas called? And I am not, again, I can't see the chat, so I'm assuming some of you are going to be answering the correct answer. And I gave you a moment, and the correct answer is squatter settlements. And again, these are people who are on the edge of the community. And again, they live in conditions, if you live like this in America, like they basically just label you as homeless. These are also called informal settlements. They've been put together by the side of the river, by the side of a landfill. They don't own this land. They're just basically like making together, you know, putting whatever pieces of materials they can scrounge together. And they're right in the adjacent neighborhood to people that have, you know, that have means, and that they are able to have a higher quality of life. So even adjacent to each other, you will see this. And this is actually a big theme I like to emphasize for my students. In the poor world, there are rich people, and in the rich world, there are poor people. We have these huge income disparities that can exist across the board. All right, let's continue on from here and shift now to manufacturing. A lot of manufacturing that happens in the developing world, in the poor world, is going to be textile based, and the type of industry where the biggest expense is going to be labor. And these companies like Nike, which you see on the left, hire build factories in countries like Indonesia and pay them a few dollars an hour, and then turn around and sell those shoes for a couple of $100 in America. That's a lot of what manufacturing looks like in the poor world. It's these transnational corporations taking advantage of them and basically paying them next to nothing for a product they're going to charge a premium for once it gets back to this side of the world. In contrast, on the right, what you see is the BMW factory in Germany. And yes, there's still manufacturing that happens in the developed world, in the rich world, but what you're really looking at there, it's that shift to high-end goods, luxury goods, the type of things that really have a significant markup in price. And again, you're not getting into a BMW for under like $60,000 a year. So it's a difference between a pair of shoes or a t-shirt being put together in the poor world, or a luxury BMW being put together in Germany. All right, let's continue on from there. Let's talk about scale for a second, all right? So the first thing I want to say with scale, it's going to be about identifying differences between local, national, regional, global scales, all right? And beyond just understanding the impact of something, it's also about understanding some specific details and the scale of analysis. And they've given you a map or some type of information. And if you can identify the scale of analysis from that documentation. So the very first thing I want to say to you is trying to understand the difference between scale. First off, there's a pizza place on the left that I've been to. It's called Joe's Pizza. There's a few of them in Manhattan. Many people consider it the best pizza in the city. And actually, I've been to this location. It's right off 14th Street. And it's very good pizza. There's a few pizzas I like better, but it's definitely one of the better pizzas I've had in my life. There's a few of them in New York, and there actually happens to be one in Ann Arbor, Michigan, of all places. But again, this is going to be a very local scale and specific to where they're located. In contrast, look at Domino's pizza. I'm from Jersey. I hesitate to say pizza when it comes to Domino's. I'm a little bit of a pizza snob myself. But again, globally, you will find these all over, not just in America, but around the world. And the idea is Joe's has a very local impact. Domino's has a global impact. So understanding that differentiation, they're both selling the same product, but at wildly different scales. Domino's, transnational corporation, multi-billion dollars. Joe's, very localized, very localized. All right, let's shift from there and now talk about another way that we can interpret scales. So scales understanding local versus global, but it's also about a much more specific feature, and that's going to be the scale of analysis. And what I want to show you is the results of the 2020 election. We'll have Biden in blue and Trump in red. And one of the things that I really want you to look at, if you get asked for scale of analysis, which I would be absolutely stunned if scale of analysis is something you don't see tomorrow. I suspect you'd see it on an FRQ or at the very least a multiple choice question. What does scale of analysis mean? I want you to focus on that word analysis. What are you analyzing? What is that bit of information that you are looking at and trying to understand? And as you look at the scale of analysis, and I want you to look at both of these, the map on the left that shows the results of the 2020 election, and the map on the right that shows you the same results of the 2020 election. I want you to identify the scale of analysis for the map on the left, the one with all the numbers on it. If you can tell me in the chat what the scale of analysis there is, you're going to put yourself in a good position to be successful tomorrow, because you're going to understand the differentiation that I'm going for here. All right. I'm giving a moment, hoping that you put in the right answer. All right. And the map on the left, the scale of analysis for that is state. But Mr. Sanchez, it's a national map and it shows you the country as a whole. Yes, that's what the whole map shows you. But the scale of analysis is about the data point. So the map on the left, it's about the state. On the right, you slide over, and what you'll see on the right is, hey, here's all of America. And you see what areas voted blue Biden and what areas voted red Trump. And when you really look at it, what you have to understand, again, the data point here, the scale of analysis, tell me in the chat what the scale of analysis. If you know the one on the left was state, what does the one on the right have to be? What is that remaining data point? And I'm giving you a minute in the chat and hoping to get the right answer. All right. And the correct answer for the one on the right is county. It shows you all of the counties and how they voted. Other ways you could label both of these. For state, you could say sub-regional. For county, you can say local. Still, whenever possible, be as specific as possible. By the way, I want to show something else to you. If you had no other context, if you had no other information, one of the things that I presented you this information, like, all right, there's an election between a red guy and a blue guy, and you look at the map on the right, it'll be like, who won? Your instinct would say, well, the red guy. Well, we know that wasn't the outcome of the election. The outcome of the election was the blue guy won, Biden. So the conclusion you have to come to is that although there are fewer blue areas, those areas are going to have a much higher arithmetic density. These are going to be urban areas. So from just this map on the right alone, you can find another pattern, is that urban areas tend to vote Democratic and rural areas tend to vote Republican. All that from one piece of data that wasn't even labeled for you. That's a type of skill you're going to have to be able to demonstrate tomorrow. They're going to give you a piece of information and you have to make 20 conclusions from that piece of information and give them the one that they want. All right, let's continue from there. Sustainability, all right? Huge theme in human geo, all right? And trying to figure out how to build up economies without trashing the environment. This is one of the UN's development goals, promoting sustainability and economic growth, and economic growth while being sustainable, all right? So building up economies without trashing the environment, also using resources without depleting them, all right? Basically understanding the concept of conservation, using something in a way that future generations will be able to do so as well. Preserving the environment, a big theme in human geography is understanding like, hey, we can't trash the environment, and some parts of the world need to just be left alone. A big part of the world that probably needs to just be left alone is Brazil and the rainforest specifically. Why? Because that's a whole lot of trees, and I know what those trees do. They suck up carbon and they spit out oxygen, and there's this thing I like doing every few seconds. It's called breathing. So the idea of preserving the environment, and you see on the right the picture of the wind turbines, the idea of energy alternatives, finding ways for renewable energy, which are going to be able to keep us going a lot further than what we use right now primarily for energy. Can you tell me in the chat what we use right now for energy that we know is not going to be around in the future, that it's eventually going to run out? All right, I'll give you a moment. I'll give you a moment. If wind power is renewable energy, you could have said non-renewable energy, or even more specifically, I hope some of you said fossil fuels. I like to joke dinosaur juice. If you watch the movie Cars, that's why it's called Dynaco, because the fossil fuels are old dinosaur juice. All right, let's continue on from here. Let's talk about gender roles. And again, a picture of one of my favorite people in the world, Malala, all right? And the way she has advocated for women, and the idea that the role of women is critical to development as a whole, all right? And the way, and you probably might want to write this down, when it comes to understanding the role of women, I always advocate for what I call the 4 E's: educate, employ, empower, and elect. Let me talk you through each of those. When it comes to education, when you educate people, you give them the opportunity to take care of themselves in the future by being able to earn more income and provide for themselves. That's education. Employment is when they actually get that job where they'll be able to take care of themselves. Empowerment is putting women in positions of leadership. Hey, not just is she an employee of the company, but she might be running the company. And the final one, elect, one of the key indicators of the health of a society is, are women part of the national government? When they are in positions that make decisions for the country as a whole, it benefits. And here's the 5th secret E: everybody. Promoting and empowering women doesn't just help the women, it helps everybody as a whole. It expands the labor pool. It creates more opportunities for economic growth, all right? It's not a coincidence. The richest places in the world, women are pretty close to equal. I say close to equal because there's no country on earth where they're actually equal, but close to equal. The countries where women have the most struggles happen to also be many of the poorest places in the world. All right, and there's a variety of reasons for that, ranging from negative attitude towards women to life expectancies being shorter because of maternal mortality rates and the risk of getting pregnant in these countries for women where they don't have proper access to healthcare, whatever the case might be. But it's kind of a conversation ender. The countries where women are treated at least close to equally do better as a whole, and the countries that don't do better as a whole. Continuing from there, let's shift now to talking about some exam strategy for tomorrow, all right? First off, let's talk about approaching the multiple choice questions and how you should approach each individual question. And this is gonna sound silly when I tell you, read the question. You got a room full of AP kids, meaning a room full of smart kids. You're so smart, sometimes you anticipate what's gonna be said or what's gonna be asked of you. Well, if you anticipate too much, you might read what you think it should say instead of what it actually says. So read the question. Then after that, read each answer option. Even if you think the answer is A, still stop to read B, C, D, and E. There's going to be A through E tomorrow for the multiple choice. Read each answer option. And the reason I emphasize to you, read each answer option is because, remember, they don't tell you to pick the right picture. Sorry, they don't tell you to pick the right option. They tell you to pick the best option, which means you might have a right answer and a right-ish answer. If you see the right-ish answer first, you might have fallen right into their trap and not realize that D or E was a better option. So read each answer option, and then I'll tell you, read the question again. Read the question again, all right? And why do I tell you to do that? Because sometimes reading the question again, it will give you, with already knowing what the possible answers are, will give you better clarity. You might think, but Mr. Sanchez, I don't have enough time to do all this. Yes, you do. That time is it's gonna feel like an eternity while you're in there. I'm telling you, it's gonna feel like an eternity. You're gonna be able to do this on time. Read the question, read each answer option, read the question again, and then ask yourself, what is this question actually asking? Sometimes it's something very simplistic and obvious, and you don't even realize that that's what they're going for, particularly on some of the questions that might have a map or a chart or a picture attached. Guys, there have been examples over the years of questions where it's like literally just like, hey, here's some numbers on a chart. And when you really read the question, it's just asking you like, which of these numbers is bigger than the other? And making sure that you're choosing the thing that's labeled associated to that bigger number. It can be as easy as that. Is this number bigger than that number? So again, read the question, read each answer option A through E, read the question again, now with the choices in mind, and then ask yourself, what is this question actually asking? And you move on from there. And remember, it's the best answer, not the right answer. You might have right-ish answers. Next, all right, easy mistakes. Focus on your bubbling, all right? Please make sure, guys, bubbling is a skill. Make sure that you take it seriously, all right? Here is my first story. If you skip a question, bubble it accordingly, all right? As in skip it. If you're working your way 1 through 60 and you skip number 17 on the book, make sure you skip number 17 in your bubble sheet as well. Years ago, story time. Years ago, I had a student, brilliant kid, best student I had that year. The kid skips a question somewhere around the 30s, he told me later, gets through the exam, gets to number 75. There used to be 75 questions on this test. Gets to 75 and then realizes he's answered 75, but he's bubbled 74. And he has that moment of horror where he realizes, oh no, I messed up my bubble sheet. He had to go back, figure out where the mistake was, and then shift all of his answers down. He ran out of time. He did not get to finish adjusting all his bubbles, and he left about 10 questions that he knew when the time ran out. He knew he did not have what the correct answer should be bubbled. Now, this kid was a genius, so he still recovered and was able to score a 4. But had he had those extra 10 multiple choice questions, probably gets 8 or 9 of them correct because he was brilliant and would have gotten himself a 5. He didn't because he messed up his bubbling as he went. Next, here's another story. Bubble as you go. Guys, a story a few years ago, had a student walk up to me right before exam season of the next year. So she's a sophomore. She walks into my classroom. She says, Mr. Sanchez, I have a confession to make. I'm one of your stories. I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, last year while I was taking the AP exam, I got the brilliant idea of I'm going to answer everything in the booklet and then transfer everything into the bubble sheet. This was back when the exam was still 75 questions. She answered everything in the booklet, started transferring her answers to the bubble sheet, and she ran out of time. I asked her, so how many did you not get to transfer? She said it was about 25 questions. A third of the multiple choice questions she did not get to put a bubble down for. She scored a 2. Had she been able to answer those 25 questions, I'm convinced, forget a 3, she probably would have scored a 4. But she made a bad decision deciding to do the booklet and then the bubble sheet. Please bubble as you go. Next, don't spend too much time on one question. It's 60 questions in 60 minutes. If you can't get it after about a minute, move on and go to something you're going to be able to answer much quicker. Also, skip it on your bubble sheet. Don't become the story. All right. Ignoring the stimulus. If they've given you a map, chart, or pictures, another theme throughout the session, it's there for a reason. All right. This isn't like math class where it's like Farmer Bob has 2 shovels and Farmer Joe has 3 shovels. What's the average weather in Westerville, Ohio? That's not what they're trying to do to you. All right. If there's a stimulus there, it's because you're supposed to answer the question from that picture, from that chart, from that map. Next, do not talk yourself into an answer. Remember what I said to you. All right. If guys, like, it's not the right answer, it's the best answer. You have to talk yourself into an answer. You are making a colossal mistake. You are talking yourself out of the right answer and into the trap answer. All right. And what I will equate this, here's a little life lesson with Mr. Sanchez. If you have to talk yourself into dating somebody, you probably shouldn't be dating them. If you have to talk yourself into an answer, well, under these circumstances, twice a year when the sun's in the right angle, this is the right answer. You've talked yourself into the trap. Go with the best answer. Do not change answers. I hesitate to say that. I'm a big believer, like, go with your gut. You're smart. Trust yourself, with one exception. Only if you have made like a catastrophic error or later something from one of the other options is like hits you like a lightning bolt to the brain. Like, oh my God, I thought about question 24 completely wrong earlier. That's when I'll give you permission to make a change. Basically, if you have like that lightning bolt of knowledge hit you and you just realize that you thought about the question previously wrong. If you've answered it and you have no reason to change it other than just you've talked yourself into, maybe it should be B. No, you have fallen for the trap. Move on with your life. All right, let's shift now to FRQs, the basics on the FRQs. You're going to have 75 minutes to answer 3 FRQs. That works out to about 25 minutes each. You don't have to do them in order. You can do look through them. As a matter of fact, the suggestion I make, look at prompt 1, look at prompt 2, look at prompt 3. Whichever one you're most comfortable with, do that one first. All right. And there's a space just for that one. So let's say in order of ease, the second one's the easiest, the third one's medium, and the first one's hard. Then answer them 2, 3, 1. And work in that order. All right. Also, I want to emphasize to you, there are 3 FRQs. Story time. Years ago, I had a young lady. She took the AP exam. She walks out, and I literally saw her have this. I heard her and saw her have this conversation with some of her friends. They basically said, oh, and by the way, you're not supposed to talk about the exam. The FRQs you can talk about 48 hours later. The multiple choice, you're not supposed to ever talk about them. Just putting that out there. But basically, she walks out and I hear them talking about the exam, and I'm trying to just walk by because I'm not supposed to be part of that conversation. And one of them says something like, I forget exactly what the details were, but like, oh, what do you think of that third FRQ on agriculture? And she goes, what third FRQ on agriculture? There were only 2. And they all start to look at her like she was crazy. What do you mean there was only 2? Like, there's 3. Back then, they used to have the FRQs on one sheet of paper. So on that sheet of paper, there was 1 and 2 on the front. She never turned the page to see the third FRQ. All right. She did not answer the third one. And the crazy part, the third one was the easy one. That was the one to rack points from, and she missed out on that opportunity. She ended up scoring a 2. That's another one. Smart girl. Had she just seen the third one, it was the easy one. She probably would have gotten 4, 5, or 6 points out of it. That might have pushed her to, at the very least, a 3, possibly even a 4. So please, there are 3 FRQs. Also, another story, like, be careful with this one. Oh, well, I think one of them's a lot tougher than the other, so I'm not going to make an attempt to answer that. Guys, even the toughest FRQ has 1 or 2 easy points that you can try to go after. Try each FRQ. And the way I equate this is each FRQ is half your score. Multiple choice is half your score. 3 FRQs, 60 multiple choice questions. Basically, each FRQ is the equivalent of 20 multiple choice questions. You wouldn't leave 20 multiple choice questions blank. Then why are you going to leave an FRQ blank? That's bad strategy. Make an attempt to answer all 3, even if you spend less time on that harder one, and just try to get those 1 or 2 easier points. That is worth the effort on that third FRQ. They're going to be set up, likely going to be 7 points each, and set up A through G. That's not a guarantee, but highly likely. They could wiggle that around a little bit, but they've really shifted to A through G for the FRQs for human geo. All right. I'm going to roll through this quickly. I've already done a bunch of stuff with this, and if you've seen any of the previous YouTube stuff that any of the previous sessions I've done for Marco Learning through Human Geo, you've seen a lot of this already. All right, the action verbs: identify, being able to recognize and provide an example, and that's going to be, hey, here's a map, here's a bunch of countries shaded in, can you identify one of them? Years ago, there was a FRQ that had that map, bunch of countries shaded. Identify any of them, and the correct answer was Madagascar, and a lot of kids got that one right, and a bunch of kids, it was the only point they got right on that because they were able to identify Madagascar. Or provide an example. They might give you a vocab term, and then you have to in turn provide an example of something that applies to that vocab term. Speaking of vocab, and again, Human Geo, we are a vocab crazy class. Like, there's a lot of vocab for this course. So defining is important. Being able to provide a meaning for a word or concept. Do your best to be able to provide a definition. I'm going to say something in a few minutes. Like, guys, I don't think you should spend like the rest of tonight studying until 3 in the morning. I'll get more into that later and why. But again, guys, the foundation of this course is vocab. That's what every Human Geo teacher I know, including myself, is neurotic about, like brainwashing you into knowing all of the vocab. If you see identify or define, these answers are generally short. Basically, identify it, write 1 sentence, move on. Define it, write 1 sentence, and move on. All right. Okay, thank you. All right. Mrs. Raz, thank you. All right, appreciate for you sending the whole crew over here. Appreciate you. All right. Basically, for definitions, write the definition and move on. Something I want to say to you, and this is like, I can't emphasize this enough. Be careful with identify and define. They're pretty short, and you're going to be tempted to say more than you need to. I have seen kids talk themselves out of an identify or define, because basically, like, if you identify something, you can't then in turn identify the complete opposite. It's a contradiction. You have canceled out your opportunity to earn that point. All right. Please be careful. Identify, define, give it a sentence, move on with your life. Continuing. The trickier ones, well, not tricky, just more demanding. All right. The harder action verbs. All right. Describe, explain, compare, and explain the degree. These, you're looking at about 3 to 5 sentences. You're looking probably at a solid paragraph here. All right, let's talk about describe for a second. First off, describing, you got to prove that you know a concept. And how do you do that? You provide details, story time. This happened to me. This is the old man sentence. When I was your age, when I was in ninth grade, I had to do a book report. And this book was, and we had to pick any book we wanted, and we had to do a 3-minute verbal presentation on it. And I, being the genius that I am, picked an 1,100-page book. I really wanted to read it. I picked that book. 1,100 pages later, I do like a very quick outline of it, and I give a 3-minute explanation as per the instructions from my English teacher, who then proceeded to call me a liar in front of the entire class, saying that I hadn't read the book. And I was livid because not only had I read the book, I loved the book. It was my favorite book I'd ever read to that point, still loved that book. And essentially, she didn't believe that I had read it. And she had read the book. She starts asking me questions. And I hit her with detail. And I finally answered so many of her questions. She said, well, I guess you read the book. Still questioning it. But I was able to prove to her that I had read the book by being able to provide details. Give enough details here so the person reading it in Cincinnati believes that you understand that you know the concept. Explaining, you got to provide that understanding, and one more step. There's usually going to be some level of analysis here. By the way, explain is going to be the one that you're going to see most often. All right. All right. So again, shout out to Mr. Plumber's kids for joining the chat. Thank you so much. Glad you could be here with us today. All right. So you got to provide that understanding of the concept and that one more step. And I want to emphasize to you the words because, or, cause and effect. A causes B. If you can get that next level analysis of why this is happening, you're putting yourself in position to get that explain point. Also, stretch your answer as far as you reasonably can. And here's what I'm going to present to you. All right. If you are in guys, I've had this one happen all the time. I'm with my students. I'm going over an FRQ. I'm telling them why they did or didn't get points. And the one kid goes, oh, this was on the rubric. I thought of it, but I didn't write it. Guys, if you can use something and justify it to support your answer, don't leave it in your back pocket. Use it, please. If you think of it, use it to support your answers. All right. You're not going to get an explain point from a sentence. You have to really develop that thought. So try to push it out as far as you can without just talking for the sake of time. Continuing. All right. Continuing from there, compare. Finding similarities or differences between the two concepts. And this is the biggest fail I see in compare. They forget to reference both concepts. Guys, I live in Florida. If somebody says you have to compare the climate in Florida and Alaska, and I go, well, that's easy. In Florida, it's hot. And just stare at you blankly, I didn't get the point. I have to make the specific contrast. In Florida, it's hot. In contrast, in Alaska, it is cold. You have to, if they're asking you to compare two things, you must reference to both things. If they're asking you to compare farming in the rich world versus farming in the poor world, you have to make points about both to show those differences. The last one, and this is the most challenging one, this is the one that's really going to make you earn your money, explain the degree. Explain the degree to which a feature might be present, all right? It's the most involved of the action verbs. I'll actually tell you, if you see explain the degree, and it's like part C or D of one of the FRQs, push it to the end. You don't have to answer them in order, but you should label them. If you need to go A, B, D, E, F, G, and then come back to C because it's explained the degree, I would do that. It's going to take the most effort to get that point. So you want to save it for the end in case you run out of time. Because here's the thing, an identify point for Madagascar is worth just as much as explain to the degree to which the von Thunen model could be, could be used to analyze farming in the US as a whole. That was an FRQ ages ago, all right? So how are ways to explain the degree? Establish how much of a feature or model is present. To a high degree, to a low degree, a lot of this, a little of this. You need to establish how much of that feature there is, all right? Also, one way you're going to be able to earn this, at the bottom says how a model can be applied to the real world. And I just gave you an example. They took the von Thunen model, scaled it up, slapped it on the United States, used New York as the market center, and pushed west from there. And I believe one of the prompts was explain the degree to which the von Thunen model could be applied to agriculture in the United States. And then you got to talk your way through that. All right, continuing on, things to avoid on the FRQs, all right? Answers that are too short answers can be dismissed, especially if it's unexplained or explained to degree. They expect like a good bit of analysis there. Answering something other than the prompt. I didn't even mention this. I've been an AP reader for years, going to Cincinnati to answer a few thousands of these every year. Guys, and there's times I read some of these, I'm like, wow, this is a great answer to something completely different than what was being asked. Answer what they're asking you, not what you wish the question was. Please label your sections of the FRQ. Big mistake kids make is not labeling the FRQ. Guys, the person scoring this is going to read a few thousands of these over the course of a week. They might read it on day 1 or they might read it on day 7. Please put them in the position to find your point by labeling A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Also, not finishing your thought. That's another huge problem. The idea that, hey, you're in a situation where you're trying to like move through quickly. I got this, boom, nailed it, move on. Guys, you got to finish your thought. This isn't a rap battle. You're not trying to drop the mic. Finish your thought, please, all right? I was asked, you have to restate the question. No, don't restate the question. Answer in a complete sentence and move on with your life. Restating the prompt is just going to eat up time that you shouldn't be wasting. Not referencing the stimulus. If they're giving you a map, chart, or picture, it's there for a reason. Use it. That's another theme for the night. It's there for a reason. Lastly, not focusing on what you know. Guys, if you get to the FRQs and you look at, let's say, the second FRQ, which should have one stimulus, you know part A, you know part B, you know part C, and you have no idea on D, E, F, or G, well, then just do the best you can on A, B, and C. And whatever time you have left, try to think your way through D, E, F, and G. It's like the old writers thing. Just start writing. You should land on something at some point. Next, all right. Sorry, I'm like stuck here. All right, here we go. Last thoughts tonight. If you don't know it by 10 o'clock tonight, 10 p.m. So in about an hour and change for my East Coast people like me, or in about 4 hours for my West Coast people, West Side, all right? If you don't know it, you just don't know it. So get some rest, get a good night's sleep, and remember, you have to be there tomorrow. The exam starts at 8 a.m. You need to be there early, especially for those of you who are in places where school starts later. My district starts at 8:20. We have to hit those kids over the head with, you need to be here by 7:15. You need to be here by 7:15 because they're not used to it. And again, story time, don't become this story. The kid who shows up at the regular start time comes to my classroom like, whoa, where's the exam? I'm like, dude, it started 20 minutes ago. You got to do the makeup. Too late. All right. Also, just generally, makeups tend to be harder than the original. That's my understanding. So again, I don't know how accurate that is, but the vibe I've gotten from kids who have missed the exam over the year, the pass rate for those kids is lower than in comparison to all my other students. Continuing. Final thoughts. Tomorrow, the exam is 8 a.m. Be at school early. Tonight, don't try to cram content. All right. If you want to look at anything tonight, go for some easy reminders, visuals out of the textbook. Sometimes the visuals in the textbook are the same exact ones they turn around and use on the exam. Have a non-sugary breakfast so you don't have that crash and burn tomorrow. Bring a snack for in between sessions. That's a big one. Guys, you have about a 20-minute break between the multiple choice and the FRQ. You don't want to be hungry and starving. It's a long morning. And I just like this one. Talk to the funny kid before the exam. All right. Talk to the funny kid before the exam. Take the edge off, and maybe try to like just walk in with a nice smile on your face. All right. I like that meme on the right again, because it's again, Marco labeled. All right. The idea of like hey, even if you don't know, at least be as cute as Marco. All right. That is it for me. Remember to follow all of our social media at Marco Learning. I'm at the Human Geo Guy. I want to just jump in for a second. Again, I had a lag on the chat, so I want to see if there's any specific questions I want to answer. I'll spend like the next 2 minutes doing that quickly. I'm not sharing my screen anymore, so I can get out of this. All right, let me go to YouTube. All right. And let me look at the chat and see if there's anything here. I'm seeing the delay, which is throwing me off. I'm seeing me, whatever. The funny kid's gonna get kicked out. Oh my God. All right. He has like 4 jobs. What? I used to, not anymore. I used to have 4 jobs. All right. Mr. Winter's class, shout out to Mr. Winter's kids, Mr. Plummer's kids. All right. West Side, there you go. Who else? All right. Continuing. Mrs. Rivas, that's my friend. She sat next to me at the AP reading, all of Mrs. Rivas's kids. She is the GOAT. Love her. Good friend of mine. I'm hoping to see her this summer. I'm going to visit Jacksonville, hoping my family can meet up with her family. All right, continuing from there, Ridgeview. All right. Okay, perfect. All right, that's it for our chat. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to wrap this up. I wish you the best of luck tomorrow and hope that all of you are successful. Take care, everybody. You got this. You can do this. I believe in you. More importantly, Marco believes in you. Take care, everybody. Bye.